Yeah, isn't that crazy? It's frightening, I know. I've got a 12-year-old, I'm 49, no. All right, in reality, more productivity is lost from employees having to fulfill their caregiving responsibilities than child care ones. That amounts to $34 billion a year lost in productivity, because what happens is people go to work and you're consumed with everything that's going on at home. You're getting text messages, whatever. It's a thing called presenteeism. So it's not just lost from you being away from work, it's you being at work and not being able to perform your duties. So some studies indicate a loss of productivity in addition to healthcare costs amounting to $25,000 per caregiving employee. That's a lot. And then an estimated 42% of working Americans say they've provided care for an older family member within the past 5 years. So MetLife officials conclude that an average individual female caregiver, which we females are the usual suspects, more so than the men, it's going to eat or reduce our ability to max out our retirement. Because what happens is we're getting close to retirement, and then oops, we've got caregiver crisis, and we instead of working more hours, which we're supposed to, or going for promotion, we reduce our hours or leave for 6 months to 3 years or whatever. And so those because the last few years of your work time, or you're supposed to max out. So it's extra stress on us. I see your face. I'm like, yeah, I know. So what do you think of these stats? Anybody surprised? Sadly, no one's surprised. Okay. So today's agenda, we're going to just look at being a caregiver to your parent. This term, for anybody unfamiliar with the term sandwich generation? Okay, so I know some of the students were not as familiar with it. This was coined in 2006 by, I'm trying to remember her name. I want to make sure I get her name right. But actually, if you Google sandwich generation, you'll get her name. Her name is Catherine. Hold on. I'm not sure it's really all that important, but it's right here. There she is. Carol, Abaya. A-B-A-Y-A. She has her own website and does a lot of guest speaking about this topic. I don't believe she's from the West Coast. Okay, so talking about the tough decisions, and hopefully we'll talk about them together today. Caregiver self-care, which is actually my specialty. If you burn out, it's that old adage, if you're in the airplane and if you don't take the oxygen first, you're no good to anyone. That's the reality. And you all have fabulous resources. Did I get those from you, Jerry? Holy smokes. So I was building this presentation, and I have my usual resources through Kaiser or the county or whatever. And then she sends me the UCI resources. I'm like, wow, you guys are really very supportive. And they're all smushed in this house. And there was a lot of, one of them had tuberculosis, my mother got, it's this weird story, but that experience was so negative for her that she vowed, I will never become a burden to my children. And my mother was fiercely independent, child of the Depression, Irish. It worked against her as she aged, because once she did become in need, and I'm the only local family she had, it was very, very hard for her. So I'm sort of sharing this because there's difficult discussions, but we have to put it in context to the people that we're working with, family, and what their experience of being cared for, or the idea of being cared for. Think about it yourself. As we're getting older, I don't like the idea of having to become what we think of as a burden, but that's what I want to talk about today, is really sort of look at who you're with. We think we know them really well because they're family, but go back another generation and see what that was like for their family as well, okay? So then the other thing is, it doesn't necessarily feel right. So even though, let's see, I was 40 when my mother, so 9 years ago, yeah. So she started to get very ill at that point. Our relationship was never close to this, which it shouldn't be necessarily, but she always had the upper hand. And so even though I'm in the healthcare business, that didn't matter. So there was not this ease about it. It didn't feel natural for me to go up to my mother and say, you know, your doctor's prescribed you some medication. I noticed you're not taking your medication. That was never, ever going to happen. That conversation could never happen. I don't know if you've ever had a parent who was just that kind, that she just had to raise her eyebrow and you knew to. Yeah. Don't have that conversation, because that was where she was at. There are cultural expectations that go along with it. So my mother, there wasn't necessarily a cultural piece to that. That was the time. So this was my mother was born in 1928. So when she had all these people in her house, that was just how people were still living. Now we're looking at different cultural expectations that come from other countries, and those are being current. And so I think that the younger folks that have our first generation, or even more, there's this expectation that things should go a certain way, and there's a bit of a culture clash there, yeah? Okay. And then I kind of alluded, did anybody have some interesting family dynamics going on? I come from a very colorful family, do you? Yes. Okay. What do you want to say about this? Would you add anything?
It's definitely true when you're talking about the issues with parents and medical history, etc. My wife's mother passed in November, and we just moved in with my father-in-law to help essentially care for him. But my wife's mom, who passed from a form of dementia, was never one to take care of herself. Mm-hmm. Would always take care of everybody else and absolutely neglect her own health. So when you're saying, Mom, you need to go in, she's doing, oh, no. She hated having anybody go to the doctor with her. Yep. Much less going to the doctor. So when it came to the point of making sure she was on top of her medications and everything, it wasn't uncommon to have little battles regarding that. And to the point of, you choose your battles, mm-hmm. as difficult as it is, But yes, now we're at the point where instead of having the parents take care of you, we're taking care of, her dad now. And he's been not as stubborn, but equally as stubborn. There are certain things we turn a blind eye to just because he's going to go out on his own terms. But other things that, again, choosing your battles where you have to say, you need to do this, you can no longer do that, which is one of the reasons why we've moved in with him. Mm-hmm. Are you glad you did? Yeah, it's the right thing. Okay. For various reasons, it feels like the right thing. I mean, we're back in my wife's family home where she grew up, so it's not like a foreign mm-hmm. building or anything like that. But there are definite changes, obviously, because mm-hmm. it's his house, but it's also now sort of our home, and it's a matter of finding those things that allows it to be home for everybody. Mm-hmm. Having things change, but trying to be as respectful of what needs to remain the same. So it's an ongoing dialogue, even to the point of having the dialogue and making sure that his voice is heard, and having to probe for what he's really thinking sometimes, because my father-in-law won't always say really what he's thinking. Mm-hmm. He'll allude to it in his own different ways, but which you learn to decipher, mm-hmm. as it were. But it's a work in progress. Absolutely. I'm glad you see it that way. What's your name? Rick. Rick, thank you. Yes, ma'am.
I think there could be a whole class on that. And probably support groups would be really wonderful.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
There is a form out there. If you happen to be a Kaiser person, there is a caregiver support group. But there are many, you'll see. Please think about that. That would be great. Yes, thank you.
I'm also thinking not only just the sandwich family situation, but the sandwich and blended.
Yeah, nicely put. Yeah.
And so I'm in a sandwich blended.
Oh, nice.
And so we are struggling right now with who is in charge. Because my mother-in-law is 83. I wouldn't change a thing about her living with us. She's at a point in her life where she needs to live with family, and so that's fine. We did not establish any boundaries because you don't know what to establish when you don't know what you're going into. And it's hard to reestablish once you've welcomed anyone into your home. It's really hard to then establish something because it seems like you're being punitive. But the only, the sadness is that you didn't establish anything to begin with. So I would just advise anyone who's in here, if you've not taken a relative or parent, before you say yes, establish what the boundaries are, and maybe reach out to other people to know what kinds of boundaries should be established, because we just didn't know. So that's a huge struggle right now.
Thank you. What's your name?
Veronica.
Thank you,
You're
Veronica.
welcome.
Yeah, I think we're exploring a lot of uncharted territory for us, and it's not supposed to be natural. And even though having a child's supposed to be an inborn that you know what to do with your mothering, but I really don't think that it comes like as smoothly as it's supposed to just because they're family, right? It actually can be a little bit worse. Yes, ma'am. Please, please.
My mother-in-law last year retired after working at Macy's part-time for 20 years. And she'd been living on her own up north and driving a car and all of that. She retired in June and moved in with us in August. And we didn't know how poor her health was. That's the other thing.
Oh, wow.
So we thought we were welcoming, and we would have brought her in either way, that we were bringing into our home an 83-year-old, in pretty good health, who just sort of needed some family support, push aside all the operational stuff of living every day. We can handle the laundry in the yard, and you just enjoy your retirement and enjoy. But we welcomed into our home an 83-year-old who was very ill.
Yeah.
And it was the reason is that because we never went to all those doctor's appointments, all that other stuff, and because they don't allow you to go. But if you don't go, and you don't know, and so maybe one of the stipulations to having mom or dad come live with you is that you go to a few doctor appointments before that decision is made, because your home may not be the perfect place to live because of your work schedule and all those other dynamics. Maybe it is, but you really can't know that if you don't know their health condition.
Well said. Thank you. Yeah. And the other thing, I'll jump in my head right now just because it came to me, but we'll look at it later. When my parents were ill, and we lost one, and then we lost my mother. It's just my sister and I, and she lives in Michigan. At that point, because they had so poorly managed their health and their lives, I mean, financially, talk about cleaning, and then my mother was a hoarder. I mean, it's all good stuff, right? So we then became very bonded and came up with a pact that as we aged, and we started having conversations. I've already had conversation with my 12-year-old, and my husband, and not to freak him out or anything, but I mean, I think it's so important that we start getting this plan together now for our age, because I may not be in a frame of mind or have the ability to have the frame of mind to make those decisions. So that living will is so important anyway. But I think it's important that people know what your wishes are ahead of time. And then it makes it so much easier, because the reality is when they hit a certain age, medically speaking, we will have a health crisis at some point that will lead to our passing. And so until, we can't wait until that moment to have these things, and that's why we're having this discussion today. Yes, ma'am.
And with the doctor's appointments, What I found in going through it with our two dads was that the doctor was actually receptive to me calling the office and saying, you know, I'm not sure Dad is getting all the information from you the way it is. You know, could you help us in understanding what his situation is? Trying to get that early on, but letting my dad know, you know, I totally respect that this is your health condition. I will not do anything that's going to endanger that. But we all have to know what's going on ahead of time, and we have to understand it fully. And, you know, I know when I go to the doctor, if there's 13 things they mention, I get 2. You know, so I try to get my mother then in with that now, where I go with her to her doctor's appointments, and she realizes, and I take her to some of mine, because I want to get her into that mode now with being able to trust me and know that she's a part of my life, and I'm going to go. And it was not the easiest transition. We're an Italian family. You know, everybody knows everything. So, you know, but trying to get that trust build ahead of time is key. But once we got into it with my dad, I actually did need to call the doctor and say, I'm not sure he's getting all the information. Could you find a way that we could maybe while he's in the appointment, you could say to him, could you bring your daughter in? And, or could you bring so-and-so in? And sometimes the doctors will be very receptive to that. They can't, you know, they're not going to take out patient confidentiality, but they can offer your parent, you know what, I really think Jerry needs to come in because I want to make sure she gets all these fine details, and maybe that will help you in the situation now.
And just as a matter of fact, explore with the healthcare system that you're working with. Kaiser actually has a designated medical release for your, so let's say I'm with my mother and I know she's not going to be super reliable. As long as she signs a consent for me to be, they can, right? Good. Okay, great. Can somebody be my timekeeper? I forgot to ask. Give me a 5-minute warning.
You're 12:26.
Thank you. All right, so here's the funny part, ha ha ha. A sandwich, and I asked somebody, are you pumpernickel, are you rye, are you pastrami? Okay, what is she talking about? Okay, so we culturally speaking, or what have you, many people come into this and we're just high speed, going for it folks. I don't know what am I trying to say. We're just really hard workers. And so we want to, it's hard for us to think that we're not able to take care of certain situations, because especially at work, I'm sure you guys are extremely capable and well thought of and stuff. But then it starts to accumulate. So you've got work, you get married, then you get promoted, maybe you have a child, you're doing really well, then we've got some added things that come up. It might be even your health, or your something happens with your children or your other family members. So then the demands at work start to get it really interesting. Responsibilities at home, and you're all the way here, yeah.
So for me to just pick up and leave my new husband for a week or 2 weeks, or however long I have to be there, creates problems with my new marriage, as well as problems at work.
Yeah.
It's just, you know, I mean, I suppose I should have expected it, but my parents have been in great health.
Yeah. Well, and you're in love. Who's got time to think about that? You found a new relationship. You're married. How wonderful! And then this, yeah. What's your name?
Melanie.
Melanie. Ever felt like this? I see some faces in here. They're looking like that. Yeah. It's a little untenable, and then it becomes extremely untenable, and then squish. So the idea of the sandwich generation, you know, as much as I'm making a little bit light of it, it's really to understand there actually, your body takes a physiological hit and becomes, it becomes like a pressure cooker. Okay, so it's a form of stress, but I think that you've got stress in all the avenues of your life. So it's one thing to have stress at work. Okay, at least you can escape to home, or maybe you have really good friends. You can, okay. But then if I've got stress at work, then I get the crisis call that I got to get to the hospital, and then my son is in CIF finals for football, and I'm expected to be the so-and-so's getting married. I mean, these make your head explode, don't they? Okay, and then what happens is I've got all this happening physiologically in addition, and I can't sleep. Then my new relationship, my spouse is starting to do this, and I'm going, and so I've, I don't have to go on, but this is where the sandwich idea comes from. It's the idea that not only are we living together, and there's sort of the sandwich, but there's also this compression of expectation and environment. Anybody want to comment on this?
Yeah, it's one thing, I understand you're a newlywed, you've got, a new life. Even similar with that, my wife has health issues because she's a heart patient. So to care for previously her mother, and now, with her father, the stress definitely affects her health on top of, normal concerns with everything. Fortunately, she's got really great understanding people that she works with. But it's, when you're stressing over your own given health on any given moment or for whatever reason, along with, okay, well, we've got requirements here, we've got things to do here, we've got stuff, we have to worry about the kids, and okay, now my father's fallen because he's done something he really shouldn't have done, and someone needs to order him into the emergency room. It really, really does add up. And one of the reasons that she'd be here right now if she weren't home not feeling well with that. But it's definitely taken a toll on us. That's one of the reasons why, again, we're here, because we need to learn about this so we know how we can cope. I mean, we're fortunately constantly having discussions and putting our cards out on the table just so we know what we're thinking with everything, because communication is key. But it really does. There are times when I even just wanted there was one time I even sort of let loose a little bit on my father-in-law, not harshly, but it was, okay, there's the pressure valve. And it's difficult because when you've got things you're trying to do, things that you're trying to take care of that are important, and you have something else that comes up care-wise that really, had your parents used a little common sense, could have avoided it. Sometimes it's just hard not to want to snap.
Of course.
It's a challenge. It really is a challenge.
That's for sure. So here's some tough decisions that I'm sure have gone through your own mind, and then we'll lighten things up a little. All right, so do I take a leave of absence from work or stay home and care for my loved one? Anybody ever thought I had to think about that? Yeah? Okay, so this is where it gets really tricky, because you're going to have to start asking questions about money. And finding out what kind of medical insurance your parents have and what their financial resources are. Very touchy stuff. How will I be able to afford a skilled medical care or long-term care? And how will caring for my loved one affect my family? What other things would you add? Because I've got some, you guys are the experts in here. What would you add? Yes, ma'am.
I would add that if your parents are anywhere from my generation, they always said, oh, when this time comes, just put me in a home. And, having learned everything from the ground up between my grandma and then our two dads, what I realized is the home was more work, because we did for a while have a home for them, and it was more work because someone had to go in the morning, someone in the afternoon, some in the evening, because the home doesn't run just perfectly often. They, as they're working through with your loved one, if your loved one says, I don't want to get up all day, they might leave them in bed. And you and I know that then their mental cognition goes downhill if they're not moving and getting oxygen to their brain. So in the end, we ended up, all of us, going to the facility every day, and it was more to drive there, in our case, than to have her at home or have him at home with people coming in to help us. But those kind of things you don't know till you get there. My mom always said, oh, you just gotta put us in a home, we'll be fine. Oh my gosh. It was more stress because then we find out fall, you know, and different homes are different. We had to visit like 12 of them. It was just not as easy as I thought it was gonna be.
Yeah. Thank you, Jerry. Anything else that other tough to, yes, ma'am?
Well, another thing sort of touched on is negotiating with siblings.
Ah,
It's
yes.
Like, we said earlier, who's in charge, right?
Yep.
The other thing is, that, so, you know, I have parents that are married, it's my father and his wife, my stepmother, so you've got elderly people, couple married together, one with significant health issues, one that's muddling along, and then there's 7 siblings altogether, considering the 2
Families,
that
yep.
got, you know, married. So there's a lot of people involved and a lot of different, you know, so tough decisions have to get made. How many people have to be involved in making the decision?
And if they all disagree.
That's the
Which,
challenge.
and it, oh my goodness, some of the most interesting behavior comes out at those family meetings.
What?
Yeah. Yes, Veronica.
This did not happen to me, but it sure did alert me. Some friends of mine, their mom was aging and still cognitively strong and had, you know, some considerable assets. So they decided to, my friends, sell their home. They all agreed. Sell their home. Mom would sell her home, and they would buy a joint home that would work for everybody. A one level. They sort of figured it all out, and they actually had a home built. And once she moved in, it was about 6 months before everybody realized they couldn't live together. Then all the family members get involved. Who owns the house? Let's sell the house. We need to buy out mom's share. It really became
Ugly.
a thing that tore the family apart. It sounded like a great idea. And so I guess I'm alerting everybody, you know, give a test run or come with these ideas. Because for 2 families to sell their property, then jointly go in on a loan for a home, and everybody puts down, so, I mean, it was ugly. And she had some relative drive up one day when my friends were at work and move her out of the house. They come home, now mother is gone, with a note that tells them how much they owe her. You know, it was just really ugly, but it sounded like a great idea, didn't it? Yeah, something for everybody.
Yes, sir.
One thing, and you know, even if you just have 2 siblings, you know, between my wife and her sister, they are so polar opposites as far as their personality goes. It's interesting how things work. But that being said, if you're able to do this with siblings, is to sit down and say, all right, who has what sort of strength? Who is willing to take over what have you? So my sister-in-law, for instance, takes care of all my father's finances, or my father-in-law's. So she's got all his finances and stuff in tow. She takes care of essentially paying his bills because he's, you know, working off a reverse mortgage at this point. And a lot of the nitty-gritty paperwork, she's good at that. So it's perfect for her to take care of that, whereas between my wife and myself, for us to be there to be more hands-on caregivers, that suits us a little bit better, even as taxing as it is. Because when it comes to getting certain things done, we have a bit more common sense about it than my sister-in-law does, God bless her. But if you're able to divvy up to say, who's willing to do what, so you can hopefully have everybody equally involved with something they're comfortable doing, that can be a great help.
Sounds good. Hopefully, yeah. Sounds like a great idea. Yeah.
On paper it is.
But, so to your point though, so this is where actually as I was building this presentation, a very good friend of mine who's a colleague who teaches as well, she's in the middle of this. And so I had her look at this presentation in its raw form, and she added some stuff. Part of this is what she gave. So she lived with her family, with her parents, and has a daughter. So there are actually 1, 2, 3 generations in the house. But I think what was interesting about what she said was, and this is true if you look historically, that folks that are in their senior years, the more they feel like they're needed and have responsibility, their health continues to hang in there. So what she said was working as a team. And the other thing is the language you use. So if you work with your family members, your older family members, to say, okay, we're going to see how this works. We're going to work as a team. And you keep them in a position of respect, for sure, and ask for their input and give them some jobs. So if they're able to, and you've got children in the home, have them help with the caregiving. My girlfriend said this was very important. The grandparents actually passed family history down to the granddaughter, which she, my friend, didn't have time to do. She works all the time. So a lot of the stuff she was hearing from her daughter and hadn't heard these stories for years. Her daughter was reciting them back to her, which is sort of interesting. So in terms of a family history perspective, there was a lovely connection that got made with the grandparent and the child, and it gave the grandparent work to do, and they felt helpful. Now, the daughter, my friend, was the financial breadwinner, and that was extremely difficult for her parents to accept, but they felt like, well, they ended up doing the cooking and the caregiving for the daughter and are still able to do that for a little while, but working as a team. So keeping it as that idea, and this is to your point, what was your name again? Rick. Divvy up jobs. Okay, so if you've got a point person to be the coach, and then actually always the elderly in the house should always be you always keep them feeling like they're the wise ones in the house and giving them the respect, but all the team players come up to support the king and the queen, if you will. Okay, so transitioning with the caregivers, do not attempt, this is where I think I had my first version had this a little bit wrong. Don't try, and I didn't say to take over, but my words were wrong when it was, don't attempt to take over, okay? Because you will get the fight of your life with your parents. It makes them very unhappy if it looks like, and this is the interesting thing, if you think about it, okay, so there's a crisis with your mother or father, you are trying to take care of the situation, you just, I don't know if you're like this, but you get blinders on and you just I go into automatic. I'm really good in crisis. I should have been an ER nurse. But, and I'm extremely efficient, but I have said nothing to the person that I'm caregiving for. Okay, I just took over. And it wasn't because I was trying to be mean or anything, I just decided to do that. Not a good idea, okay? So you always want to slow the process down if you can, or after the crisis is over, just really think about it because, the road to hell is paved with good intentions. Okay, so really thinking about where you're coming from. It's hard to when you're in that crisis mode because you're just going, but so thinking about it ahead of time and then after the crisis is over, respect their needs and wishes as much as possible. Don't automatically assume that they're no longer able to make certain decisions. Okay? Anybody want to say anything about that? Yes, ma'am.
And perhaps giving them safe decisions sometimes is a good technique in the sense of I couldn't have my dad be making some decisions, but I didn't want to appear as I was taking over his life because that would cause so many problems. So it became okay to give him certain decisions and things to think about, just like you're saying, give them certain tasks that they may be able to do. Give them certain decisions about their life that are safe ones, but include them in that conversation, and then they tend to dial it down a bit with the other things. It's just having the ability to stop the panic because of that one decision. You don't want them to be, and give them other things to think about and work on so that when you do get to that other thing, they're not as hyped up and on the defensive.
What's an example of a safe decision?
So a safe decision for my dad was, Dad, we can get your own taxi service to take you wherever you want to go. Would you like that? Because I don't want him to feel like he needs to drive. But giving him a part in that decision, let's go see the taxi service nearby, and let's go see who's there, and you can get to meet. gave his mind something to think about and to realize I was trying to give him some independence. Things like that. I'll come up with better ones, but that's what I remember. Just made him realize, okay, she's not trying to keep me in my house. She wants me to go out, so I'm not as freaked out about the other things she might say about, why we're not driving and all that.
Meal planning is another thing that's important to some people, so that they get to choose what they get to eat.
Because at 90, who cares if you have the hot dog? Have the hot dog. You're really gonna.
Very good. Yeah,
I
yeah.
agree with you 100%.
Oh, absolutely. If they want to stay up all night, they should be able to choose if they want to, their sleep cycle gets all goofed up anyway. Just let it be. So there are things that don't involve finances and medical care that are important to them. Okay. So this is the point for all of you. Now we're going to start talking about all of you as caregivers. Care for the caregiver. Isn't that a pretty picture? Wouldn't you like to be there right now? It's Friday. I want to be on the. Can you feel the sand underneath your toes? Breathe the sea air. It's lovely. Okay. So my discussion today is, there's the heavy duty stuff about the reality. This is having a little more fun. We're going to start playing with that sheet in just a moment. But, sorry, it's a trite phrase, but or commonly used phrase, thinking outside the box. But it truthfully, being able to work with the way things are, when you're tired and stressed, you forget any kind of creative thinking. You just go. I've worked with so many extremely fatigued mothers and fathers, and I ask them, what would you like to do? And I get, I don't have time, there's no way, I don't know. What do you need? I don't need anything. I've got this, everything gets lost in that, you get lost in that cycle, right? So what we're trying to do, again, prevention is everything, finding time for you with creative problem solving. So if you do have if you've got children or their grandchildren involved, bringing them involved with the after-school pickup sometimes is possible, and they help, or they can oversee homework, which is, I think, a really neat thing. If you've got, my father was brilliant, and it was sort of funny. He could remember, chemistry extremely well and mathematics really well, and it made him feel better because he still had that. So that's really important. Finding, believe it or not, there are responsible teenagers. Did you know that? Responsible teenager, are you kidding? Or college students who need internship hours. Okay, so I was thinking about this, and I think we don't, our communities aren't as connected sometimes, but this is an opportunity to help give something to somebody that would help you. So let me help you, you help me help you. You know what I'm trying to say. Find people in the community, people who need volunteer hours. There are a lot of high school seniors that part of their graduation requirement is to engage in the community. They need X amount of hours.
Goes on their transcript.
Amen.
Yeah.
Right? Yeah. And you could actually write a letter of recommendation to a university for a young person.
University High School.
Yep. Yep. So these people become extremely useful to you. Okay? We get kind of funny about it, though, because we've got this control issue. I can't let anybody in my house that I don't know, and da-da-da-da-da, they won't do it as well as I will, blah, 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 right? The social work and nursing department, so on and so on. And then there was this. She had me ahead of time. Melanie had me. Okay. Our significant relationships, I've known, unfortunately, quite a few couples that this has caused great distress to their relationship. So what I encourage people to do in this sort of situation is every little bit counts. The going out for coffee, holding hands, whatever little thing you can do. You don't have to talk, because sometimes we've been caregiving all day, and the last thing I can do is think to talk. Just sit and hold each other's hand. Seems like, but honestly, there isn't an answer to a lot of this stuff. It's hard. There's not a good solution. But as long as you work together as much as possible as a team, the better. And it sounds like Rick and his wife have a good communication going. Be in it together. Don't one person, because it's interesting if it's like it's your parents. This is a new relationship too for you. So it kind of alienates the other person because they don't have the history with the other family members. So what you're wanting to do, give them some role in this as well. See if they could be helpful to you. Don't separate out and go in one direction and forget about them. And it's hard not to. But as long as even you're talking about it, really helps. Would you suggest anything else? Anybody else have some good ideas for how to keep yourselves together? Yes, ma'am. That's all right, Veronica.
Well, because I think we start to talk with other couples who are caring for aging parents, and there's always one person who thinks that the aging parent is about ready to die and really weak and really pitiful, and just you've got to put their socks on and tie up their shoelaces. And the other person in the marriage thinks mom or dad can do a lot more than you might imagine. And that creates a lot of distress and a lot of arguments. And there's probably, when my husband and I have sat down and had some of these hot, heated conversations, there's a little bit of what he's saying that's true that I'm missing, and a little bit of what I'm saying that's true that he's missing, because we have these perceptions about who these aging people are. And if there's a way to write, we started to write down what we think are our mom's limitations, and we were able to kind of bridge and find 2 or 3 that we agree on, and we kind of work with that. But it took us a long time to get there, because we each have these perceptions about what these aging people can do and what we should be doing for them. And sometimes when that differs, it creates a lot of turmoil and stress.
Yep. And a big R word, resentment. Resentment, which is really toxic to a relationship. Yeah. Thank you, ma'am. So staying connected. What I want to say about that is this is a connection, and I hope that maybe it might open some more conversation. It would be interesting to have. I don't know if this already exists on campus, but it would be nice for there maybe to be a caregiver support group here on campus. There are a lot of people that are probably really in this. But connection is everything. So when I feel like I'm out there fighting in the trenches by myself, I don't see things clearly. I don't have good ideas. But just sitting here, I've heard a bunch of interesting, just to know other people are hearing or dealing with the madness, okay? The other is now we're going to start working on your sheet. So if you've got your sheet in front of you, may I borrow this for a moment? So in worksite health and in all things with personal health care, we're wanting to help you feel like you have structure for change. So the first site, your goal on here, now this is about you, not your family member, okay? So not your spouse or anything. So I would like you, if you feel like it, you don't have to share, you're just going to write it down, because hopefully you came in here wanting something. So you're going to write down my goal on this side, okay? And then you're going to turn it over on this side, okay? So go ahead and write your goal in if you haven't done that already. Yeah. Pen? Yes, ma'am. Okay. If you have a pen that doesn't work, I have plenty. So here's a couple of ideas. So when you flip over your sheet, these are my little quickie ideas to help you with. So sometimes we're looking for help and we don't know which way to go. So I've got finding balance on here, which is easier said than done, but I've got 3 different aspects to it. So what I suggest strongly to you today, because everybody, well, I'll get it all together, I'll practice mindfulness, I'll eat well, and I'll make time for exercise, which is really play or movement, dance, Zumba. Anybody like Zumba in here? Zumba. Okay, right? Okay, but the idea is I would like you to choose one area to focus on that's related to the goal you put on the other side. And you're going to do it for a week. And I'm going to give you my card, and I would love it if you would correspond with me. And a week from now, next Friday, you say, hey, Diana, I was in your class. My personal action plan for myself was I wanted to do 3 minutes of deep breathing, which I'm going to show you how to do in a minute. And I did it 3 days this week. Yay! Or I struggled to get it, or whatever that was. That's what I would offer to you today. So if you would like to stay in contact with me on how to take care of yourself, I would love that. Okay? So I'm part of your resource. So 3 minutes a day makes a difference. We're actually going to do some deep breathing in a minute. I put outside, I didn't have enough for everybody, but you have a lot of different resources on your website as well. But how to get quick meals in. So this is a fun way to get some quick meals in. You got to keep your nutrition up to keep your strength up. And then movement, because movement actually, if we were to give everyone a prescription for movement, we would reduce our chronic health conditions significantly, because it does everything we need it to do pretty much. So we are going to do this now while you are coming up with your goals. So I'm going to have you stop your writing for a second so I can make sure that you all know how to practice deep breathing, because I'm low on time. So do I have any yoginis or yoga practitioner students in here? Very good. Lovely. So sometimes I think we feel like the only time we can go do yoga is at the yoga studio. We can do deep breathing. I try to deep breathe all the time. Okay. So as you're sitting in your chair right now, if you'll actually uncross your legs. Deep breathing costs you nothing, is so effective because it sends a signal to the brain that you're paying attention. So everybody put your hand on your stomach for a moment, because I just want to make sure you're positioned correctly. So deep breathing comes from the belly first. I'm going to show, if everybody watches me, the belly should expand all the way out. No shoulders. And then you exhale. So you cannot exhale out anymore. All the way out till there's this need to open up again, okay? I'm doing it a little different than a yoga breath. We're doing a deep breath. So everybody take a deep breath in, roll it in, and blow out hard. You cannot breathe out anymore. All the way out, all the way out, and again in. No shoulders, no shoulders. And roll it all the way out. Focus on the exhale. One more, all the way in. And relaxed out. You can't go out anymore. Lovely. Okay. Nice. Did you feel the energy shift a little bit in here? Love it. Okay. So I really hope that today, if you didn't get anything else out of it, that you remember to put your hands on your stomach when you're sitting and take deep breaths. That's actually mindfulness. Your body needs oxygen. You're actually sending a signal, and the brain knows it's okay, I'm okay. The other is, there's something really lovely, soothing when you actually just quiet so you can hear yourself breathe. It was neat just standing and listening to all of you breathe. Okay. So continue, if you didn't get a chance, keep working on your sheet for a moment, because I got to wrap up. Any questions about deep breathing? Always remember to get the exhale all the way out and no shoulders. But I saw some people breathing from their shoulders. Belly, like a baby. Belly breathe. So this is how to, wrapping it up. We talked a little bit about this. Make sure you involve your family have family meetings, prioritize and delegate, like you were saying. Delegation is really helpful. You have so many resources, as I mentioned. And then trying to communicate. Don't sacrifice your own well-being because it'll just make more problems. And trying to set a realistic plan. Okay? Joan Baez, does anybody know who Joan Baez is? Do I have any people old enough to know who Joan Baez is? Okay. So you don't get to choose how you are going to die or when. You can only choose how you're going to live. I like that quote. So we need to wrap up. What are some of your thoughts or some of your goals? What can I do for you?
Come back every week and do this again. Thank you.
You're welcome. Was this what you hoped it would be? Kinda? Good.
If I come in with no expectations, I can't be disappointed.
Well, I wish all my students were like that. That would be lovely.
They don't always live that way.
Yeah. So here are your resources. You guys all know how to find your resources on your website? What's that?
I would say that probably a lot of people do not, because a lot of these, because of doing this Caregiver Resources Workshop series, I went online to all our resources and asked Diane Hall, who's the coordinator, once to clarify some of them, because it's not evident. It's not actually
dear.
very self-explanatory. So these things do exist, and I didn't even know that. So.
Okay. Yeah, your EAP system is fabulous. You have Optum Behavioral Health as well. It's livewelandwork.com. There's your access code. I don't know if did those slides get copied?
Uh-huh.
Oh, lovely.
Yeah.
So you guys have everything?
Yeah.
Good. Okay.
These are all great. They're laid out here.
Good. So, and if you are, do I have any Kaiser members in here anyway? Lovely. Okay. So there, as I mentioned, there is at the Kaiser facility here in Irvine, there is a caregiver support class. The schedule is on that sheet outside the door. And you can bring non-members with you, as far as I know. Okay, so as long as there's one member, you can bring your significant other or friend or whoever. So thank you for letting me road test this with you all. It's an evolving process, but I think the most important thing is work as a community, because I think that it's such a big issue now that I think that you guys can help each other out by the learning that you're getting. And this is a continued discussion. So I thank you, Jerry, for inviting me up here today. I will be hanging out for a little bit if you'd like to talk to me. Have a really good weekend and be well.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And